honored to have with us the creative and technical team behind the recent Secret Sky production. It was an all-day concert that debuted in WebXR with songwriter and performer Porter Robinson spearheading the vision and the curation of this Keystone virtual event. I'm looking forward to hearing insights from the team behind this event and learning about everything that was involved in making this vision come to fruition. So welcome team Active Theory.
Hey, thanks for having us. Over the course of the year, we kind of developed the DreamWave platform, and then kind of when the second version of Secret Sky hit, we had the ability to create these avatars that could run around multiple different environments. We could get the live stream directly into the feed. So you're kind of bringing together all these different audiences for the first time, and it's just really interesting to create these sort of digital destinations where you don't really know what's going to happen, and we're kind of just we're a part of this experience. We're a part of this this new form of connection between devices.
The reception to it and the press inquiries and everything was just wow, this is a thing. There's a real kind of desire here. There's a real opportunity to create kind of something that meets in the middle between social media and gaming and entertainment. It's a little bit more of an art than a science. It is knowing what types of shaders to use. We have processes built in that allow us to write shaders that before the shader compiles, it checks, is this running on an old piece of hardware, and maybe it strips out, a complicated noise algorithm in a shader, things like that. So a lot of that stuff is built in.
We're always pushing our work as far as we can in terms of performance. So we ended up building our own WebGL library. So I think the more that we can kind of push it and squeeze out of the devices, the more we can start to kind of rival some more games basically.
One of the members of our team kind of was just playing around on the weekend and came up with the ability to use Houdini to render lots and lots of avatars with arms and legs, and they can all run independently of each other. So we kind of, that's one example of how over the last year, the platform just got better and better. On our end, when it comes to making a Dreamwave immersive event like this, it's very much like using Unity in the browser. I mean, I always say that it's the easiest thing to understand. It's not actually Unity. It's we built the entire thing from scratch. It is JavaScript the whole way down, custom WebGL renderer that lets us do lots of really crazy stuff with rendering so many avatars and things like that, but also a full featured level editor. So Mo and Kimbo are able to literally make stuff in C4D and Houdini and then just bring it straight into the browser.
It really does feel like an extension of whatever 3D software you're using. So whenever I'm modeling an object or sculpting it in Cinema 4D or other software like ZBrush and such, just a few clicks you can export it and actually see it live within the context of the scene.
Some small wins that ended up making the shaders a lot more optimized for the whole experience were things like repeat textures that don't require as much storage but can pack more information, and kind of blending different textures together so that they create more detail at a close-up distance, but as well from a far away we can strip down things that we don't need. If you're on a mobile device, maybe making sure that a certain texture doesn't load.
One of the things that we also used, which is actually really interesting, was we used the video texture to power the lighting systems in the environment. If you remember the experience, it was kind of audio reactive to the visuals. What we did there was plugged in the video texture hundreds of times across all the environment, and because it had already sampled the texture, it was actually pretty performant. So it allowed us to create these really dynamic lighting systems. So if you went into the cube world, or if you saw the experience at night and had this kind of really light up stage, all of those were just powered by the video. That was a really cool benefit from us, and I did not expect it to be performant. I assumed if I sampled that video texture hundreds of times, that would have a performance implication. It probably did, but not as much as I had initially thought. That was a really cool aspect.
To boil it down, it's a node server that we wrote. You're broadcasting your position to that server at 30 frames per second. That server isn't even processing any of that data. It's not parsing the JSON. It's not doing anything. It's just receiving a chunk of JSON data about your position and orientation. And if you're in VR, your hand position and orientation. And it kind of is just using proper multi-threading with the latest version of Node using shared memory. And what it does is it kind of just, you have a whole big server, lots of different cores, and each core has lots of different users' connections on it. And it's kind of just writing all that data into a big blob of data that represents all the users in the room at a given time. we rendered about 150 avatars, and each of those avatars is rendered with a single draw call. And we do little tricks, like we do the frustum culling and see like which ones are in your vision. And if it's not in your vision, it'll still not do any of the work in the vertex shader to apply the skinning animations. One of our artists figured out how to use Houdini to render, basically bake a skinned mesh animation. So in this case, a running cycle, bake that into a basically JSON data, right? It turns into a data texture. And so then what we're able to do is it's not just one skinned model, it can be many skinned models that can apply different frames of that animation, depending on where they are in the run cycle, at different times uniquely in the shader. So all the avatars, and there were 150 in Secret Sky, and I think we learned that we actually could have done more. We just kind of kept it a little bit safe, but we probably could have gotten up to 200 or so. On top of that, there's a lot of tricky interpolation that we do to make it look like, you know, basically hide the latency. So the avatar legs running is a product of the velocity of an avatar that's moving through space. So that's why you don't get this like jumpy look. It's very much interpolated so that way the velocity kind of is smooth, and because the velocity is smooth and the legs are attached to that velocity, you very much see it like the person is actually running. You don't see them kind of skipping and jumping through space. What we've kind of always hoped to do over the years, and what we hope to especially now to really accelerate with Dreamwave, is kind of show the browser vendors that, hey, this is a thing people want on the web, and that they should prioritize performance for that. And a lot has happened over the last few years that have really made that better, but I think like, you know, more so reliability and, you know, just steady frame rates. So yeah, we're all about the WebXR API and are kind of keeping up to date. We keep in touch with the developers at Oculus, kind of about what the kind of where it's going, with what their current implementation of it is in the Oculus browser, and we do just basically are adding features to it as they come out.
Thank you guys for that awesome introduction. For those of you that have questions, please post them in Slido. And if you're lucky enough, maybe we'll post the link to the after party in one of the channels. So for those of you that didn't get a chance to register, have a chance to do that after sticking around for such a long day with us. So thank you so much. So we've covered a lot of the technical. I want to get into some of the business aspects of what you're doing. We've seen a few examples of how WebXR is great for enlivening virtual meetings, more as a B2B tool. Are brands envisioning ways to connect with consumer groups using this?
Yeah. I think definitely brands are thinking about, you know, like obviously always new ways to connect with their consumers. And I think that WebXR is clearly one of those places where they can start to explore it. It's less so though brands kind of coming to us and saying, can we have a WebXR experience? And more, as I guess historically we've done at Active Theory, like created kind of push technology ourselves and tried to kind of convince brands that it's a good idea to go there. And so I think through, 3D experiences, we've been building 3D experiences for a while now, building out these kind of environments, these universes where brands can connect with their consumers, and then enabling WebXR as a feature for them to connect, you know, with their users through that 3D environment is kind of where we're going.
So Postmates had a small integration recently. How do you guys see brands building on this platform through other events or events of their own direct to consumer?
I think if you want to talk about like the type of value that brands can get out of it, which is probably, you know, why companies like Postmates are doing kind of experimental sponsorships, then you can see some of the stats that we're getting from these experiences on the Dreamwave platform. We're seeing, for example, engagement of up to like 15 minutes. That's average engagement time. And if you think about that from a brand perspective, in terms of trying to engage with their consumers on the web, then that's really high value, right? You're getting 15 minutes potentially in a kind of virtual environment with your customers in a place like Secret Sky, where they're really there to have a great time and kind of hang out and just get exposed to some awesome content and music. So I think that the opportunity is definitely there for brands to connect, but they really just need, they need companies like us to kind of hold their hands on the way through. And then they also need to understand that it's not just like when you talk about, I guess, the Dreamwave platform that we're building, but and then WebXR as one component of it, then you don't just we don't just approach brands and say, okay, it's WebXR experience kind of straight up. It's more like an environment that we're building, or a world that we're building, and content from that world can be experienced on, like YouTube or Twitch, or people jump on Discord to chat together while they're in there. They also obviously get live streams within the environment itself, and you can also jump in with a headset. And when you think about it from that perspective, that's where it really becomes kind of, they get the kind of aha moment where they're like, oh, right, so it's not kind of exclusively headset and something that people have to download, and it's like, no, it's kind of augmenting the experience by enabling a headset, by using a headset.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all about enabling accessibility across the board. Okay, so we have some questions coming in Slido. Do you guys have any tips for optimizing WebXR performance? Do you use the performance or profiling tool in the Chrome inspector?
Yeah, we have a lot of tips. Reduce draw calls as much as possible. Compress your textures. The Chrome inspector, it's pretty good, especially on Oculus Quest. I remember telling the Oculus team that it actually surfaced a detail in the way we were doing matrix calculations, and on every other device, like, it just wasn't even showing up in the burn chart, but the inspector on Quest kind of showed us that, hey, all these matrix calculations are showing up in the burn chart. They shouldn't be showing up because they should be so fast. And we found a way to optimize those because of that. So I find that to be pretty good. The problem with the Chrome inspector is that if your GPU usage is really, really high, like you're like, a good example is when we have like a 13-inch MacBook Pro from like 2013. Everybody knows the ones, the Retina ones that can barely run their own operating system. If you're trying to ask too much of the GPU, that's going to give you some false positives in the CPU, because the CPU is going to be waiting for the GPU. And so you're going to be like, oh, my CPU usage is really high, but it's a little bit tricky. Honestly, at this point with the tooling, some of it is just, a lot of it comes from experience. You kind of, like that scenario I just described, you kind of know, what to look for. But generally actually, honestly, the thing I find more than the performance tab is the profiler tab, because when you run the profiler tab, you'll get the actual, like, what code is running the most. And even though the burn chart is a little bit nicer to look at, I think sometimes the profiler will give you a bit more granular detail if you know what you're looking for. But other than that, it's kind of just like the common stuff of, like, as few draw calls as possible. Keep your shaders relatively simple. I mean, I know it's hard because it's something we fight here, where the artists want to make stuff that looks amazing, but then you end up with a bunch of noise calculations that are like dropping frame rate, and you kind of have to like play that balance. So I think hopefully there's more profiling tools in the future that are a bit more like things that could calculate how long a shader takes to render and that type of stuff. But as of yet, we haven't found anything that's particularly works for that case.
Awesome. So is anyone looking at smartphone mobile-based VR, since Google, Oculus, and Gear VR and Facebook had abandoned their offerings? What are you guys doing with mobile-based VR?
I mean, the Quest 2 Quest and Quest 2, that's mobile-based VR. I think I saw something that Vive is kind of, working on a new headset. I'm sure more headsets will be coming out, which essentially it's the evolution of that, right? So Daydream was quite literally take your phone and put it in your headset, or put it in like a viewer and put it on your head. Whereas like the new generation of like Oculus Quest 2 is the main example. The only example right now, really, but you know, it's mobile. It's mobile phone hardware in a headset, so you're wireless. I don't think that we're going to see a return to putting a phone in a thing anymore, like Daydream. It's a bit of a bummer that Google kind of abandoned Daydream. I really liked it, you know, a few years ago. I thought there was a lot of potential there, but Oculus has kind of picked up where they left off, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, I mean, well, good thing is we can still essentially use our mobile platforms to access both your experiences and other WebXR experiences. So we're good there from a 2D perspective at the very least.
Yeah,
So people without VR headsets can still get in and enjoy the shows.
for sure.
Okay, so what advice do you have? Okay. Do you have any tips for optimizing WebXR performance? Do you use, oh, I'm sorry. All of these questions are getting discombobulated. Okay. Okay. What advice do you have for scaling WebXR applications that rely heavily on real-time communication with multiple users?
Yeah, so I mean, this is honestly the hardest part of all of it, for the most kind of. Yeah, obviously you have to render stuff, but then you also have to track all the data of the avatars. The advice here is, I mean, you're going to have to write software that runs, you know, on a server, and you're going to have design an infrastructure. I don't think there's really a plug and play kind of product out there that exists. Firebase, right? A lot of times, you know, people will say, "Oh, do you use Firebase?" And no, we don't use Firebase just because the frequency of messages, right? You want to represent an avatar in, you know, moving around as close to real time as possible. You're sending, the frequency is about 30 frames per second. Could get it down a little, 24, something like that. But, you know, you'd be absolutely flogging Firebase, which is kind of built to scale a bit more, to scale without such a high frequency of messages. So it's a unique situation. We had to build like a server architecture and server software to handle this. And there's still a lot of interesting challenges, I think, that we still face, you know, like trying to get people in the same server. Because once you do this at scale and you have hundreds of thousands of active users, but two users want to see each other's avatars and watch together, that's a challenge that we still have to figure out how to solve, because the traditional ways like Redis and load balancers and things like that, they fall apart because you can't, you know, again, the frequency of data. So I would say, you know, like you're gonna have to really research and build in that infrastructure space. And then for the actual RTC communication, like audio chat, there are existing services that exist that provide, like, basically as a service, the ability to connect and basically, you know, like one upload connects to their server per user, and then you get the downloads for all the other users you're video or audio chatting with. So you can probably just search like WebRTC as a service. A few things might show up there.
Yeah, no, awesome. So apparently our audience wants to hear more about you guys and your personal stories of like who you are, how did you land in this space, why did you kind of land on WebXR as your medium and platform of choice, and tell us a little bit about how the Secret Sky project came about and why you guys decided to do this on WebXR.
Sure, yeah, I can kind of give an abridged version. We've kind of answered a lot of that over and over again. So if you're not familiar with Active Theory in our portfolio, we do web work, basically, innovative uses of web work. We started about 9 years ago. We started out doing like microsites, so a lot of that was like CSS based. A lot of our work was really rebreathed from the death of Flash. So we've always been really focused on like animation and storytelling, using web as kind of our medium. So we've done a lot of websites. We were one of the first shops to pick up WebGL, so we've had a lot of experience with WebGL and kind of squeezing performance out of WebGL. I think with a lot of our work, we're always just looking for kind of like really interesting and novel and just kind of innovative ways of using web technology. I think just as a fundamental, like, I guess, aspect of the company is we've always believed in the web as being the most frictionless way to connect people. You know, we don't want to build within walled gardens such as like Unity or platforms that have constraints, we'd rather be kind of like as close to the metal as possible. So we really feel like the web is just, it's that, it's this most frictionless way to give content to people. So a lot of our work is really just about kind of connecting people together. Over the past year, we've been developing virtual live event experiences. A lot of that was because of what happened with the pandemic. And an aspect of that was the very first version of Secret Sky. The idea for Secret Sky was actually formed when I was like I went to some music festivals, some live stream music festivals, and it was like, the festival was like a video on Twitch, and it would have like 40,000 people watching it, and they would be like spamming in comments. And I think it really lacked any sort of social presence, any sort of like way to actually feel like there's 40,000 people watching it. Like that's a football stadium of people that are watching this live stream. So we're kind of thinking, well, we've been developing these tools and we've been developing these experiences. We have a lot of expertise. We can use that to basically add a social component to a live stream medium that's already happening. So Secret Sky was, you look at the very first Secret Sky, it was like little squiggles running around the box, basically, with a live stream running. The live stream wasn't even an actual live stream because we couldn't get that working at the time. It was a YouTube player in the corner. But that was almost like a really good proof of concept because it kind of showed that like people wanted this added social layer on top of live event experiences. The act of like running around a space with other people is so different from the act of like sitting back and watching a 2D live stream. So from that, we like realized that there's a lot of potential in Secret Sky. And then over the course of about a year, we've done multiple different virtual events and built up a lot of really robust features, such as like avatars moving around, the ability to create multiple environments. And it's a really robust system now. So Secret Sky really benefited from a lot of that work. And so this version of Secret Sky was really trying to create like more of a sense of place, actually give people an avatar and they can run around. We worked really closely with Porter, who we've done multiple projects with, and he had like he was really down to, we showed him Sundance and he was just kind of blown away at the level of fidelity that we can get with WebGL these days. Because a lot of the work I'd done with him previously was more abstract, it was a lot more artistic, but now it's like we can actually create virtual spaces with virtual avatars and actually feel like you're there and you can chat. So Secret Sky was that basically, like how do we kind of recreate a music festival virtually? And the response on it was amazing. It's really cool to run into audio chat bubbles and see people kind of experiencing this new medium for the first time. I always say, like, when we develop this stuff, we're developing it in a vacuum. We have no idea how it's going to get received. We've only really ever tested it with like 10 people on it once. And then you just open the doors to these floodgates and it's got thousands of people hitting this URL at the same time. And it's just this explosion of connectivity and social interaction. And yeah, it's just amazing. And I think it's really interesting, I think, for the future of the company to keep thinking about virtual experiences and how do you create this metaverse? How do you create parallel universes where you can combine real audiences with virtual audiences? Like what interesting ways could you have to make the location of user be just unimportant? You could have some really like unique and interesting experiences virtually. And so I think that's a really interesting place for us to exist. Yeah, it's really exciting. I think that so the after party is, we've kind of spun up Secret Sky again, so you guys can check it out and you can kind of look at more detail. And I think you can kind of see just the potential of how you can actually create like a physical space and run around. And we created multiple environments, and I think that's something that we'd love to do in the future. We're always ideating, like we can basically create virtual worlds for people to come as a destination and exist in. And Secret Sky was an example of that. So yeah, really excited for the future.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, for those of you who were lucky enough to experience the Secret Sky experience, an all-day concert, it was truly amazing. And you guys have opened it up just for the WebXR Developer Summit for our attendees for tonight. So you guys are in for a treat after this. So I hope you guys do attend. And before I let you guys go, just one last pieces of advice for anybody that is looking to develop on WebXR, best practices, strategies, anything like that. Last thoughts.
I mean, I think you're betting on the right horse. We've always believed that the web is like, it's the future. So just because of its ability to just run on so many different screens, Michael has a joke that he tells where if you could get like a web browser running on a fridge, you would. So we would. It has the ability to just like create experiences regardless of which technology you're using, which device you're using. And I think we're really excited about it. So I guess just as a note, I think you guys are using the right platform and keep making stuff.
Awesome. Anybody else? Just all
Just
yes all around.
Make stuff and publish it. Don't be shy.
Yeah.
Reach out, find mentors, hit people up, DM people, and just keep practicing. Yeah, I'm just generally, that's the type of people that we are attracted to when we're looking for, new talent to come and, join the team. So I think for anyone who's looking to get into the industry, like work in the web, work in WebXR, just don't be afraid to practice and publish and bounce ideas off people.
Yeah, it's all stuff you can learn. We're all kind of self-taught people in this space, so it's just look through examples, hack it up, play around. You're not going to be an expert at this stuff immediately. We're not by any means an expert in a lot of aspects, but it's all stuff that you can learn and you can progress. And so, yeah, I think just make stuff like Nick mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. Sorry, Michael. We're just going to say we all look at stuff, and I'm sure you're included, that we've made like 10 years ago or longer, and just go, oh my God, what's that? Like, but that's the beauty of the web, right? Like that and what we try to do at Active Theory, constantly just push to the next thing, so that we hope our stuff that's a year or two old now looks awful because the new stuff looks great.
Yeah, I always say your best project's your next one. But I think to that end, it's like, don't really worry about the technology. Like, think about the user experience, think about the thing you're making. How is the user going to use it? How is it going to make them feel? Like with WebXR, you have the opportunity to build something that lets you create a literal world for someone to step into. And I think that's a pretty powerful thing. And I think, especially as like developers, it's easy to just like, be really interested in the technology. But I think it's just some good advice is to take a moment to think about kind of the user experience and the user emotional kind of experience throughout that.
Yeah, awesome. Great pieces of advice, guys. And thank you so much for joining us today. And on that note, the registration emails, the link should have been sent out, so you guys should all have received them in your inbox. And I'm going to invite the producers of this event on stage with us now, just to say their final thank yous and goodbyes.
Thank you so much.
Team Active Theory.
I'm so excited. I got my email, my headset's ready. I've been here for 9 hours, so I need to stretch and dance for a couple minutes. Yes.
So, yeah, I think there's a cap to invites, right? So it's like 200 or something. Yeah, so hopefully.
Something like that. 200 of our closest friends are coming.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, awesome.
Yeah, don't forget to chat to the big blue guy, because he'll turn night mode on for you. I made it so it's a manual toggle, so you can see what it's like with and without. In the actual event, it was something that would transition automatically, but I wanted you guys to check out the lighting system and also check out the daytime. So chat to him, he'll turn it on and off.
You have a lot of people in the audience who will appreciate new lighting systems, so that's a good move. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no worries. Cool.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us. Yeah, real pleasure.
Thanks, everyone.